And good morning. Let's see if this is all working. Can you hear me? Yes. Looks like we do have audio. Okay. It's been a while. Cheers. Okay. Let's talk about some Business Central updates. I've been deferring this for quite a while just because, yes, it's been busy, but there's just an endless stream of updates and activity in the Business Central world, as you probably may know. So this is just a small glimpse into 8 or 10 different things that I'm thinking about. In case you haven't heard, done a few videos and talked about this a little bit, but I have started an organization called ERP Center of Excellence for Latin America. And the goal will be to provide the best Business Central training in the world. That is a moderately ambitious goal, but hey, if you're going to do something, might as well overdo it, as they say. And initially, it will provide in-person classroom training in El Salvador. And the idea is that I'd like to develop the curriculum. I'd like to figure out how to screen and kind of look for qualified candidates. I'd like to see some people show up and attend an in-person class, see how the training goes, get feedback, etc., and, learn. So that is the idea. And let me fix this graphic a little bit. And so it will have Business Central training, initially functional training, application training, and hopefully we can add some Business Central application certification exam prep. And also I am speaking to some ISVs to see if we can get their involvement, because as I mentioned in my announcement video, if you train someone on Business Central, that's great. But if they aren't familiar with common ISV solutions that partners work with or customers are using, well, they'll have that limitation and they'll have that knowledge gap, and they won't necessarily be able to support someone who's using, say, binary stream multi-entity management, which is a common one that we see in the US. So it'll be good if the trainee, the candidate, the person going through this training is familiar with those products. So I'm looking into adding some ISV training, maybe a day, a week of training, and one of those days is for ISV training, just to round out their knowledge. And I'd also like to add in some soft skill training. How do you do proposals, estimates, statement of work, change requests, communication, who knows, requirements analysis, things like that. And also, one of the components is community and having a support structure, mentoring, user groups, things like that. So you're introduced in the community such that you can have a support structure, and it's not just you attended some random class and then you got to fend for yourself. So trying to pull lots of stuff together, it's quite a bit of work to make it happen. And I quickly slapped together a website, erpcoe.org. It was a very rare short domain, so I was able to grab that. So that's the idea. Let me know what you think. Okay, and just wanted to quickly thank some people who kind of helped and inspired and are contributing. Christoph, aka KB, he helped by creating the AL for Beginners workbook that I use to learn AL development from scratch. So that was a great tool. And there's now a version 2 that's available. So we are looking to use that workbook as the basis for the technical or development training for ERP Center of Excellence. And he also hosts the BC Beerinars. And during one of the Beerinars, I believe James Crowder gave a presentation on a kind of a training program, a training process that his company developed over several years that allows them to hire new employees. So even if the employee does not know Business Central, does not know AL development, he talked about how they have, say, a couple-week program where they can bring in a new student, someone who's never used BC before, and train them from scratch well enough to kind of go out in the field and start doing consulting, start doing development. It's kind of like a boot camp. So that's always been in the back of my mind, the practices that he and his company have developed to make that training possible. That's just his company. So I've always wondered, well, how does my company do that? Or how does any company do that? Or how does our community do that? And I explain in my ERP Center of Excellence announcement that Microsoft hasn't really had that for over a decade. So we're kind of starting that from scratch. And then I'd like to thank Jeremy Viska for some conversations we've had and contributions he's given me to help me think about what this ERP Center of Excellence training might look like, how it will compare to the old formal NAV training, and I've also looked at the GP training. So just trying to get some context and understanding of how to structure it. So thanks to these folks for their contributions and sharing. So, completely different topic. I have a demon, I might call it, in the Business Central realm. Just something that, for whatever reason, my brain just can't wrap around, and that is OAuth. I get OAuth. I understand the concept, and I know what the theoretical value and use case for it is. So I understand that. I've used it, got it. But when it comes to the details, it is a mess. And there are a couple reasons for that, but just look at this list. You've got your application registration and your delegated permissions, then your application permissions, and then your authorization code. But that's different from your client credentials or your device code or your secret. And then you've got scopes and callbacks and your grant admin consent when you do that. And then Azure AD just renamed itself to Microsoft Entra ID. So there's just all this noise around it. And if you go and look up the documentation on OAuth 2.0, it's completely different essentially than what Microsoft calls anything, because of course Microsoft can't use the standard names. They have to name everything on their own terms. And then to top it off, OAuth 2.0 has all of these things called flows. It's not just OAuth 2.0. You can do this flow or that flow. You can have an implicit grant flow, an auth code flow, client credentials flow, device code flow. And it's just like, what? And these terms, if you open up, say, Postman, you might see different terms, different words, different labels, different terminology, different parameters than what you might see on Microsoft's general documentation. And then when you have to do this with Business Central, it's yet another set of details, terminology, or values that are different yet again. So it is just in my humble opinion, it is an absolute mess to try and figure out. So I'm like, I'm finally sick of it. I was trying to build a tool to test Business Central APIs and just work with those in a certain context. And well, what do you need to do when you call Business Central APIs? You now need to deal with OAuth. And I was like, okay, let me just stop. And I got to deal with this. I got to figure this out, learn it. So I'm calling this Conquering OAuth because I'm so sick of being intimidated and frustrated by this that I'm just going to get it over with. So I am building a .NET WIM form because that's what I know. And I'll share a little more on why, but I'm building this .NET WIM form that exposes all of the parameters, puts everything in terms of Business Central. So what is my Business Central tenant name or GUID? what is the environment name? Because these are parameters in some of the URLs or calls you're going to make. And then there's the application registration client ID. Then there's a content type parameter. There's an OAuth URL. So there's all this stuff. These are parameters. If you try to set this up in Postman, different terms, confusing mess. I've gotten it to work, but I'm like, wait, how does this translate to Business Central? So I'm trying to do this in a Business Central specific manner with all the parameters, and I'm going to try to do the multiple OAuth flows. So I started with client credentials flow, which is also known as the S2S or service to service authentication. And so immediately you start to see differences in terminology or labeling. And so I got that working. And then I'm now going to try to move on to the authorization code, which is that second tab. And that's a completely different process, similar in concept, but different code that I need to write, different type of authentication method, different mechanism for getting the OAuth authentication request to work and get your token back. So really kind of arcane stuff that no one wants to deal with, but we do have to deal with. And thank you to Eric Hogard. He has a couple videos on OAuth, and the one I started with was the one that's ELI 5, Explain It to Me Like I'm 5, How to Access Business Central Web Services API with OAuth. And in that video, he shows how to use a client credentials or service-to-service authentication flow in .NET Core, I believe. And he shows relatively surprisingly simple code. It's less than 10 lines that you need to do this. But he kind of simplifies things as, oh, you just send in this string, but that string has parameters. So I'm breaking that out in a WinForm app here to show the grant type, the scope, the app reg secret, and the kind of connection string or parameters that you're going to pass in for this OAuth request. So trying to figure that out. Done this for 2 weekends now to kind of hack away at it. So hopefully in a month, I'll have something that works and can just release. Okay. You may have heard, if you are doing code signing for appsource, if you have an appsource app, you are currently required to sign that app file. And that's a digital signature, a cryptographic signature that requires a code signing key or certificate. I'm not sure all the components. I just don't remember. I did it over a year ago. But the requirements for code signing certs or code signing keys have changed because code signing keys and certs have been stolen as part of data breaches and cyber attacks. And what happens is when a hacker steals, say, a Microsoft code signing key or an Adobe key or someone else's commercial code signing key, they can sign malware. And that allows them to sign their malware and spread it. And that malware is not detected by default by Windows or antivirus or a firewall application gateway, something like that, because it's signed with Microsoft's code signing key. And it's like, oh, that must be legitimate. It's Microsoft, and presumably they're taking care of securing their key. So I'm going to let this malware pass right through the firewall or application firewall, whatever it is. Well, the code signing certificate issuance industry was under pressure because of this. It kind of negates the value, some value of their code signing keys. And they have, I don't know if it was mandated or if it was an industry decision, but as of June 1st, 2023, you can no longer just download a code signing key or code signing cert and have it stored locally somewhere. That's kind of how these breaches happen. So they are requiring, when you purchase these keys, you must have some type of hardware or HSM, hardware security module, something like that. It must be a secure storage device or hardware in order to store that key. They're essentially requiring that. And that can be a USB hardware token that you pay for and they mail to you. Obviously, that's kind of limiting because if you have 10 remote developers, you need multiple keys, becomes a nightmare and very expensive as well. So there are alternatives such as Azure Key Vault HSM. So that's a feature or component add-on for Azure Key Vault that provides the HSM secure storage service such that you could store your code signing key in Azure Key Vault and meet these requirements. However, this is a bit of a hassle. And some services potentially support Azure Key Vault. Some services support other HSM online services. And many services are just building their own. They're like, look, we don't want to have to deal with Azure or someone else or Google or Amazon's AWS, whatever their equivalent is. So we're just going to offer our own. Sometimes that may be included. Sometimes that may be an additional fee. So all sorts of stuff you're going to have to navigate depending on which issuance or code authority, certificate authority you're buying your code signing cert from. So a little bit of a hassle. Actually, it's kind of a moderate hassle. This affects new cert purchases. This affects renewal, storage, access, signing, and build pipelines. So today, I am lucky enough to have my own downloaded certificate for code signing. But when I need to renew, I'm going to have to deal with this and figure out, okay, as of say next year, what is the protocol for using, say, a DigiCert certificate? Do I have to use it through them? Can I use Azure Key Vault? How do we modify our pipelines, our build pipelines to automate signing? Because you need to call the HSM, get the key, perform the signing, and the initial implementation required user interaction. So how do you deal with that? I'm assuming there's a more automated way to deal with it now, but the documentation was not great the last time I checked. So if you're not aware of that, if you are an AppSource, if you're doing code signing, you got to figure this out. Otherwise, you're going to have a very bad day when your cert expires and you have to renew. And so 2 tweets, one from Martin, one from Willem. And yep, it is something you're going to need to figure out. DigiCert has some documentation. SSL.com has some of their own documentation about how do you buy. So check it out. Next up, data analysis mode. This is something that you definitely should be aware of in Business Central. It's something that, because it's still in preview and it's not yet fully released, it is something to easily forget about. My understanding is not enabled by default or in preview by default in any new environments or sandboxes. So you have to know to go to feature management, go to this feature preview, and check out analysis mode. You'll see the feature there or the option there to try it out. When you click on that, it opens up a new browser tab and temporarily enables it in your BC session. And it'll stay active until you log in again. So there's a little dialog that pops up and you can try the feature out without fully enabling it in the environment. And when you try it out or when you enable it, say in a sandbox, you will see this option on some list pages. It's just this analyze toggle that will appear, somewhat subtle, but that's the clue that analysis mode is available in the environment and that you can enable it on a list page. That's where you'll see this as a Business Central list page. So what does that look like? It is super cool, super powerful. Those of you who are familiar with Dynamics GP, we had what were called smart lists, and that was kind of an ad hoc way, not too different from list pages, but filtering and some other features. Well, this is list pages or smart lists taken to the absolute next level, and it is a really powerful feature. So once you enable Analyze, you get tabs, first of all. So you can rename these tabs. You can have multiple tabs with different ways to slice and dice and group and sum the data. And over on the right, you will see these little flyouts that allow you to choose and enable or disable columns. You will also see analysis, where am I? Analysis filters here. So you can apply filters on that side. And you'll see the grouping. So you just drag out fields and you can say, I want to group orders by customer ID or customer number. And so within the customer, it'll tell you how many orders. You expand that and you see those orders. You can drag and drop the columns and you'll notice there is a sum there. So you can add sums or counts or different analysis options to this data. And at the bottom, total rows. Super cool, super just really powerful feature. And when customers see this, they're like, wow. And this can be applied to custom pages with caveats. So I would, I was reminded of this from Eric's video, how to respond to I need a report in Business Central 2023. So he talks about how many customers don't really need a paper report, a printed report, a formal report, what we technically see as a report. Really, I think analysis view will handle, say, 90% of what customers say when they need a report. Many of my customers say, I need this, and really they just want to see data. And if they can slice and dice it through analysis view, that may take care of what they need. Now, I just noticed that in the upper right corner, I don't see the export to Excel. So that may be one caveat, one additional caveat here. So what's great about Business Central list pages is by default, you can export to Excel, or I think there's a send to Teams option. So it's really easy to look at the data, filter it, and then dump it out and send it off to someone else. I'm not seeing that here, but I do think this is going to be a phenomenal option for analysis and reporting, light reporting that doesn't need to be printed. And so some caveats here. Let me just get to this page on my other monitor. So not available on all list pages. So Yoon Chu had a good blog post discussing this, and he did some testing and he found that it's not available on every single list page. So just be careful about assuming that it's always going to be available. And what we have noticed in our usage is that it does not stay enabled. So if I am a user and I always want to go into the sales order list page and I always want to have analysis view, I'm going to have to enable it every single time that page opens. So that's kind of annoying potentially, depending on if you always want to use it. And based on a very preliminary search, we do not see a way to automatically enable analysis view mode in AL code. If anyone knows of a way to enable that by default on a page, whether that's a standard, say, sales order list page or a custom page that you create in AL, I want to know how to always have analysis mode enabled. If anyone knows how to do that, let me know. We have also discovered, we believe, that if the page works with temp tables, analysis mode will be unavailable. So you won't even have the option at the top of the page to use it. And if you switch over to a physical BC table like sales order header, sales order line, it will suddenly appear. And so we're trying to figure out what those limitations are. They may be documented. We haven't dug through the documentation yet. We just happened to notice that with a list page that was reading from a temp table. So you're using a query to populate a temp table, displaying that data on a list page. Our experience is you will not have the analyze toggle at the top of the page. And I'm just going to add this here. Based on the screenshot that I just saw here. It looks like there is no export to Excel. So that's kind of an interesting potential limitation. So if you know of a way to get the export to Excel, send to Excel, it doesn't even have to be edit in Excel, it just be send to Excel, send to Teams. That is an interesting caveat. So let me know what you think of Analysis View. I think it's pretty incredible. I recently saw a couple people tweet, I think Stefano and also Yun Chu tweeted that the Business Central MB 820 Dev exam, AL development exam is coming in January 2024. So it apparently is in beta. I don't know if January 2024 is when the beta testers or exam takers can do it, or if that's the formal launch in 2024 for public availability. But yeah, that was announced at BC Tech Days, sorry. It was announced at BC Tech Days, and take a look. I don't know if there's documentation yet on what's going to be included or a study guide. I hope so, but that is a big announcement. So MVP Francis Masongi is conducting another one of his BCAL Programming Masterclass classes, and it is coming up from Friday, September 13th through October 10th. And that is a long period of time. However, it is because he is fitting it in from 8 to 9 p.m. in the evening to accommodate his schedule and I'm assuming students who have who work during the day. So this is an option if it works in your time zone from 8 to 9 p.m. GMT +3. It is an online class. I believe he's conducted this at least once before and had good attendance. So a lot of stuff being covered. Basic AL programming to advanced, hands-on development, online sandbox, Docker containers, version control, CI/CD, so presumably DevOps or GitHub. And you can develop a project, it sounds like, integrations, web services, and certifications. So check it out. He does have a Microsoft Office forms page to sign up. That URL is kind of long, so I've created a short URL, stevendo.link/masterclass2023, and there is a QR code if you want to check it out. So sign up there, and it looks like the fee is $189, which is a bargain for a full AL development class. CentralQai. If you have not heard of it, check out the CentralQai search engine by Dmitry Katzin. Incredible tool. He developed it very quickly and he trained it and improved it very, very rapidly. And he has now, with the help of Jeremy Viska, incorporated the contents of Jeremy Viska's book, Your First 20 Hours with Business Central, into the search results. So he fully indexes all sorts of content, blogs, MS Learn documentation, YouTube video transcripts, thousands of YouTube videos. And now he's added the book, Jeremy's book, into the knowledge base that he then indexes and searches, and then he uses an AI large language model AI engine in order to review the results, prioritize them, and then output them in a natural language conversation, so to speak, like a chat engine. So check out CentralQai, pretty incredible. I need to remember to use it more often because I'm using Google, and so I need to remember to make CentralQai my default Business Central search engine. Incredible project by Dmitry. So a future topic, I was going to do it today, but then I realized I've had this presentation, Business Central updates, open for weeks, if not over a month. So I just wanted to wrap it up. But future topic is, do you get what you pay for? and a lot of analogies in the real world. And how does that apply to Business Central? How does that apply to consulting and partners and ISVs and Business Central versus F&O or NetSuite or any other SaaS solution? And one fun example is this car by Rolls-Royce is called Le Rose Noir Droptail. And it apparently is a custom commission, is kind of what I'm gathering. And the supposed price tag, I don't think they're for sale, but I think it's a custom commission. 4 of these are built. And the price tag that is being mentioned is $32 million for a car. Now, obviously, the car itself probably doesn't cost $32 million, but being a custom car with one-off artwork, one-off design, one-off color, and excruciating exquisite detail in every, square inch or square centimeter, as it were, that's where that $32 million of R&D and design went, right? That's a lot of the upfront costs, not just the manufacturing and production. So $32 million, do you get what you pay for? Apparently, to the person paying for it, yes, I guess. But interesting question, applies to so many things. So that's what I'm interested in at the moment, and I am looking to talk about that next. So I hope that was interesting. I hope you learned something new. So go check out some new Business Central features and the CentralQai search engine and sign up for Francis's AL development class. And with that, have a good weekend. Talk to you later.